So what if your entire life came with its own insurance policy? I'm not talking about one that just pays out money. I'm talking about one that's woven right into the very design of how you live. All right, let's dive into this. We're going to talk about building your own personal insurance of the web.
And this is really where our story begins. Back in 2012, a life for a lot of people looked kind of like this. Just one single pillar called income, trying its best to hold up everything else. The problem is, a single pillar is a single point of failure, and when that crack shows up, well, the entire structure is at risk of coming crashing down.
And this whole idea brings us to our first big concept for today, the monoculture trap. It's all about how modern life can accidentally make us incredibly, well, brittle.
You know, the story behind that cracked pillar comes from a guy named Graham Farrer, a horticultural consultant. And he put it perfectly. He said, "For decades, I was a monoculture man. When that single pillar failed, the entire crop of my life failed with it." I mean, think about it. He was a gardener. That was his thing. His identity, his income, it was all tied to that one single stalk.
And this is the trap, right? This is the one so many of us can find ourselves in. We rely on one employer, we sharpen one single skill set, and without even realizing it, we become super vulnerable to any little change in the economic weather. It's exactly like being a single crop in a field, just hoping and praying for perfect conditions year after year.
But what happens when that moment of crisis actually becomes a turning point? Well, that brings us to our next section, a lesson in diversity. And it's all about finding strength, but looking at how nature itself does things.
Okay, so what's really cool about this slide is just how clearly it lays out the two different ways of thinking. Over on one side, you've got the monoculture trap. One employer, one skill. You're brittle, you're vulnerable. But then on the other side, you have the permaculture principle. You get things like functional redundancy. Because here's the key, diversity isn't just about variety, it's backup. It's about building a system that's stable and interconnected. So you're not just adding more things, you're adding more connections between those things.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? I mean, how do you live a life as a polyculture? Let's take a look at Graham's life again, but this time reimagined for 2026, where he's literally woven a web of support for himself.
And he just sums up this whole shift in thinking so perfectly with his quote, "I'm no longer waiting for someone else to turn on the tap. I've designed a system that catches its own rain." I mean, that's it right there. That's the huge leap from depending on others to a life built on intentional design.
And here it is. This is what that rain-catching system actually looks like. It's not just a random list of jobs. He calls it his income guild. You can literally picture his day, right? In the morning, he might be closing his laptop after finishing a web design project. Then, in the afternoon, he's grabbing a drone controller to get some amazing aerial shots for a client. And maybe by the evening, he's out in a garden giving that hands-on horticultural advice. So when one stream is a little low, the others are still flowing. Every part of it is a backup for the other parts. And this image just brilliantly illustrates that whole transformation. It's about moving away from being that one single vulnerable stalk of wheat that can be knocked over by any strong wind to becoming part of a complex, stable meadow where the entire ecosystem supports every part of it. Okay, so that's the story, and that's the big idea. But how can you actually apply it? Let's turn the focus over to you now and talk about designing your own resilience with a really simple 3-2-1 action plan.
And we're going to start with a pretty direct question. If your main source of income just vanished tomorrow, how many days could you actually survive? Really think about it. Be honest with yourself. That number, whatever it is, that's your starting point. That's your current resilience yield.
Okay, so starting with that number, we can build. Here's the 3-2-1 action plan. First, you apply 3 ethical filters to guide every choice you make: earth care, people care, and fair shares. Think of them as your compass. Second, you start to diversify in 2 key life zones: your income, obviously, but also your home. And finally, that brings us back to your one immediate yield, that number of days you can survive. Your mission is to make that number grow. And you know, it all comes down to this one core idea. Abundance isn't just a lucky season, it's a permanent design. Things like resilience, security, abundance, these aren't just things that hopefully happen to us. They are things that we can actively and intentionally build right into the fabric of our lives.
So all of this leaves us with just one final thought. The web is there, waiting to be built, woven with your own unique skills and interests, creating a support system that truly holds you up. The only question left is, are you ready to strengthen your web?